I'm Mike Hall, the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation, and through our missions and programs, we support the Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life program by providing experience, guidance, and vetted resources for current and veteran Rangers and their families. We support the Ranger for Life program by providing benchmark transition assistance. We understand that transition is a lifelong event that starts at enlistment. We maintain transition counselors at each Ranger battalion and conduct Ranger for Life symposiums at each location once a year, offering timely and personalized support in the regiment's transition Big Five, which are mentorship and networking, education, financial wellness, VA benefits, and holistic fitness and wellness to active duty as well as Ranger veterans. Central to our approach is our extensive mentorship program, leveraging a network of about 10,000 formal and informal former members of the 75th Ranger Regiment who provide unvarnished experience and access to their networks. They know what success looks like. These meaningful relationships allow both mentors and mentees to stay connected to the Ranger community and benefit from shared experiences and guidance. Today, we're going to hear advice from Ranger Network mentor, soft legend, and my old friend, CSM Rick Lamb. Rick, it's great to catch up with you. Thanks for all you've done giving back. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your military and post-military career?
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Major. It's awesome to see you, and thanks for the invite to share with the fellas. I joined the Army out of high school in 1977, and I was truly fortunate to serve in like two of the three Ranger battalions, and then four of the five Special Forces groups. And that was back, if you remember, when we could crosswalk between group and regiment. In fact, I wish we still had that opportunity today. And again, I was blessed with great leaders throughout. I mean, everywhere I went, I had guys like my first company commander was Dave Grange, and that's a really tough act to follow. And then, of course, he served under Mike Farrer as well. I mean, both those guys were just awesome mentors in uniform and still out of uniform. So I served about 26 years in uniform, and 12 of those were overseas. And again, I was blessed to walk on every continent except for Antarctica and Australia. And I also got to participate in just about every special operation from Eagle Claw, the Iranian hostage rescue mission, up through Iraqi freedom. And so I was fortunate to serve in Korea, Panama, Somalia, Haiti, Kosovo, Djibouti, and about 48 other countries. And so it was just an awesome run. And after leaving the Army, I cross-trained as an intel analyst with DIA, and it was under I think General McChrystal, Ranger McChrystal's F3 EAD, the unblinking eye is what he called it. And he wanted to be able to find, fix, finish, exploit the target, analyze what you took off the target, and then disseminate it rather, so that it would spawn other raids. And sometimes they would just do intel raids to get to the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. And actually that kind of started in Somalia with Task Force Ranger, and then it grew into what the guys did with Flair and Elan for about 20 years across Iraq and Afghanistan. So I did that for about 12 years, and we built all the interagency and international partner relationships. And then about 2015-ish, they started they couldn't settle the budget. So they offered early outs for if you had 12 years in the DIA at that time. If you were over 56, which I was, then they would let you retire early. So I called my wife. She said, "Go." so we early retired out of DIA, and I think the next day we were on a plane to Korea, and which is her home country, and we got assigned as a contractor to SOC Corps. And again, story of my life, as luck would have it, you got KJU. He comes in, he's shooting missiles, across and over Japan into the EC there. He's cacking off nukes on their little test mountain, and we actually started bringing Rangers on Penn, and we had a company of Rangers, 365, and we started setting the theater for the O plan. It got that kind of dicey. And blood stocks, ammo stocks, and then KJU. I think he saw the rumblings and he backed down. And so I stayed in Korea for about 2 years. and then came back home and joined the Global SOF Foundation with Colonel Stu Braden. And that's where I started to learn about suicides and those type of things. I'm still on their advisory council, and then I talk to Stu daily. He's my ranger buddy that calls me.
Well, thanks. When people say, "Do you know Sergeant Major Rick Lamb?" I go, "Yeah, he's like the Forrest Gump in real life because every time something's happening, Rick Lamb is there everywhere from, as most people know, the Korean War is still going on. There's an armistice, and Rick received the Silver Star as a result of the Korean War. Not in the 1950s, but yeah, but has been involved in everything from hand to hand axe warfare to dropping B-52. So Rick, it's always good to see you, and it's great to call you a friend. I think 2 years ago, Rick, you were asked to assemble a small team and look at the problem of military suicide and the impact on special operations forces. What did you find to confirm or deny your team's assumptions?
Yeah, so again, you guys probably know Tony Main. And so it was actually Tony and I did Tony did all the heavy lifting. He's smarter than me. So I am Forrest Gump. I'm just dumber. But so, so Tony and I started looking at suicide. It started hitting home. I mean, guys that we knew had just talked to, and they said they lied. They said they were fine. And but going into the project, our first assumption was that we assumed that our soft suicide rates would be lower than the general purpose forces. And what struck us was we were wrong. And they were both surprisingly consistent. And so we figured that with our selection, our assessment, our training, the unit morale, that it would provide an edge, but it didn't. And so then we started digging. We again, when they started hitting closer to home, we started going and seeing the families, and we conduct just low level interviews, little investigations, and what we found was there were 5 relationship based factors that Tony actually termed the 5 resiliency factors, or the 5 Fs. And what we found was that loss or 3 or more of these resiliency factors, it added sufficient stress to what was going on in his life already, that if it was left unchecked, it would lead to suicide.
Yeah. Why don't you go into each of these 5 factors? And I think you actually put a formula or a prioritization on them, which would, help to prevent some things. So tell us about each of these 5 resiliency factors.
Yes, yeah. They're rank ordered, but it's based on your current situation. It's based on where you're at in your walk, and because they shift and they reorder themselves. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
When it's raining, you need something over your head, and now you're hungry, so now I need some food, and then you're scared, so you need some security. So it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so as the situation develops and as it changes, so do your priorities. And so the resiliency factor, what we find out that kind of shocked is that they're dual purpose. It's like a double-edged sword for every one of these. So if you lose any of them, then they function as this catalyst that leads to your demise. But if you reinforce the same ones and fix them, then they function as a lifeline that you can grab and keep yourself afloat. So if an individual, what we found was if you lose 3 or more of these resiliency factors, you may become overwhelmed, and then you're going to contemplate suicide. And so the first resiliency factor is fitness. And what I tell the younger guys that are getting out, do not get fat. Yeah, that is the number one thing. I mean, because you're to eat the same way you did when you were burning, thousands of calories under a rucksack, but don't do that. You're gonna have to figure out where you're at, but don't get fat. So fitness is both mental and physical. So and what we found out was that a lot of the guys are debilitated by post-traumatic stress, blast overpressure, concussion, blunt trauma, brain injuries, or just fair wear and tear from serving in the regiment all your life. The traumatic injuries, they've become more common, like the last couple of decades, and it's based on changes in weapons of warfare and the loss of mobility that these guys suffer, loss of limbs, loss of eyesight, serious burns. I mean, all this stuff is now common, and you add to that the advances in medical treatment and the speed of the medical evacuation. And it actually saves lives. And in the past, probably should have perished, but didn't. So in these cases, recovery is almost always prolonged. It's painful. The scars are lifelong. They involve the loss of meaningful employment. Then the spouse, they usually become the primary caregiver, and sometimes they're forced to go back to work and support the family. And so this just places a heavy burden on the entire relationship. So the fitness, both mental and physical, very important. The family's the next one. So family is both blood and marriage. The importance of family, the counsel of a loved one, and it can never be fully appreciated, we found, until it no longer exists, until you are truly alone. And so loss of family due to divorce or abandonment, it incurs the same process of grief that most people suffer through the loss of life, through death, right? And so many times a veteran, we found was they're responsible for the breakup, because a person suffering from mental illness or physical pain, they can be short-tempered, they can be abusive, and then they actually drive away the people that could and should help them. So fitness, family. So faith is the third one. It's both secular and religious. And this is kind of the long pole in the tent that we found. I mean, you've got to believe in something bigger than yourself. I mean, it's seriously a requisite for life. Faith highlights the natural order of things, which every ranger who's been under a rucksack, who's been out in the swamps, he's been around God. I mean, he sees him every time he's humping through the woods. So that natural order out there, it provides a purpose. It brings closure to you. It answers questions, like, why am I here? So God, and what we found too is that a lot of guys will get soured on God. So when you see that he's uncaring, he could have helped or should have helped, couldn't help, then what good is he? And so because all this hardship, you doubt. And then you look at the nation, and then the nation, a lot of times, you're so politically polarized, a lot of times the nation no longer seems worthy of defense, because you've got this progressive rot and corruption that's out there in your soul. Without something bigger to believe in, whether it be secular or religious, it becomes corrupted, and you just become destitute. So in that destitution, then your thoughts generally turn dark. And so restoring and maintaining faith, probably the most crucial of all the resiliency factors. And because what we find is that faith will move mountains. And we've seen it before. The guys that shouldn't die did, should have died, didn't. And it was because they were strong, they're mentally and physically strong, faithfully strong. So friends is another one. And so friends, everyone requires a close and honest friend to hold them accountable. We all have them, and we just need to reach out to them. We need to be better friends to them. So friendship is said to be the single most important thing that impacts psychological health. And that's what the shrinks tell us. So having somebody present, in times of trouble or in times of joy, it's invaluable. And again, close friends they're sometimes hard to find. The average person, they say, will have 12 friends. And so within that small group, only 3 will be trustworthy enough to tell them your darkest secrets. We called them 3 a.m. friends. So when the phone rings at 3 a.m., you're not going to blow it off. You're going to see who it is, and you're going to actually answer it. And you're going to pull your pants on. You're going to walk to the garage while you're talking on the phone, and you're going to get trash bags. You're going to get duct tape. You're going to get lye, and you're going to get a shovel, because there's probably a body that needs to get buried. So that's a 3 a.m. friend. You call them in the worst of times. And the rest of them, they'll probably publish your pain on the internet. It's called the 312 rule. So you have to figure out that 312 rule, and that's the challenge: is figuring out who is maintaining the relationship, and then just add. So another we found that was the number one cock block for suicide was a ranger buddy picking up the phone and calling. And I talked to a kid that had literally almost had a gun in his mouth. The phone rings and he picks it up, and it's his ranger buddy. Snaps him out of it. And so friends, very important. The last one is finances. So, and it's money versus job satisfaction. So job satisfaction is the critical piece, because it reduces your stress. And again, since it's all about relationship, most people don't quit jobs, they quit bad leaders. And so if you're having issues at work, and you don't like your job, it's usually because of a bad leader. So looking at it, you have to have enough money to feed your family and fund your passions. And that's the desired end state. So having too much money may lead to ruin. We've seen that a lot. And having no money is also problematic. Then you'll end up homeless. So a lot of guys will swear up and down to their wife, I'm getting out, I'm getting out, I'm getting out, I'm not deploying again. And then they take the money, deploy for a year, and then wonder why their marriage is suffering. So, think about it. Don't go with the money at the detriment of your family and your health. So choose wisely.
Yeah, very insightful. There's, you're going through each of the five. I'm going through my life and seeing how it exactly applied to me, and I got, very, very similar examples. I was taking the garbage out earlier, and I was thinking who I consider my best friend. My best friend was one of those guys that basically I was a leader and basically publicly embarrassed me because I was out of control. You know
Ah, yeah.
because someone had the courage, and it changed me as a leader, and of course it was important for the organization. But I mean, that's the guy I consider my best friend, the guy that publicly embarrassed me. So yeah, and the other five factors, they correlate very closely to studies of guys that don't transition successfully. And the three big factors is you have a bad transition or no transition. Luckily Regiment's got a pretty good program to take care of that nowadays. But then the other two big categories are finances and relationships, which fit very neatly into what you talked about.
Oh, 100%. And one of the problems too is and it's almost counterintuitive because the military is a very sheltered lifestyle. I mean, you go to work, everybody's willing to die for you. I want to say it was Sebastian Unger in his book called Tribe, and I think he was at the Korengal Valley, and he said that the kids that nobody liked, they would still crawl into the beaten zone and pull them out of machine gun fire to pull them back. And so you've got that type of loyalty, and your kids go to school on base, you work on base, you live on base, I mean, you shop on base and everything. And once you step out of that environment, you're out among the English, and you're just like, what happened to the country I was defending? Because
Yeah.
you're so focused. And but you're absolutely right, and that guys don't survive that transition. I mean, even to the humor that we use with each other. Use that out in the civilian world, and you're going to get bigger. So,
Yeah. So what do these resiliency factors tell us?
all right, that's a good question, Sergeant Major. Yeah, so during the interviews, there were guys who were actually contemplating suicide. We did both the families, the survivors, and then guys that had in their confidence said, "Yeah, I thought about doing it myself." And so again, the number one reason for not committing suicide was the interdiction of a friend, a ranger buddy, and that was followed closely again by mending marital relationships, making amends with family and friends, people that you've put at arm's length. Attending church was another big one, and then managing pain, getting your head and your body fixed. And then, of course, finding a stress-free job, that was a bonus. That's when you're in gravy. And so what we actually found is that we're asking the wrong questions. And so we usually ask, "Hey, Ranger buddy, how you doing?" And then we usually receive a lie in return. And even though we all know Roger's rules, we're not supposed to lie to another ranger or an officer. We do. Generally we just say, "Yeah, I'm doing great. Yeah, fine." And but the questions we should ask should be along the resiliency factors. How's your health, brother? How's your head doing? How's your family? How's your job? You still like your job? How's your prayer life, man? You've been in church lately? And have you seen anybody in the unit? So right there, you're hitting fitness, family, faith, friends, finances. And if he answers three of those in the negative, three or more weak answers, that's when you schedule lunch. That's when you know, okay, in your mind, you got to intervene. And because generally, if you get a guy talking, it'll be like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm in and out of the doctor all the time. Yeah, I hurt so bad, man. Me and the wife, we're still fighting, and I started drinking again." And once you get into those kind of issues, that's when you have to say, "Dude, let's do lunch." And so I'm on the board for the round canopy parachuting team,
Yeah.
and I joined them in like 2019, and we jumped into the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And so it's kind of this World War II reenactment group, and it jumps into Normandy, jumps into Holland. They do every year. They do the vintage aircraft. They wear the old uniforms from 1942, and then we shoot the old guns. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder here.
Yeah.
but I've got everything from a 1911 to a 1919 A6 machine gun. And so it keeps you humble because you go out in those uniforms and you're at the range and you're in slick bottom boots and you're trying to shoot those heavy weapons and you're like, how did a 19-year-old kid who probably weighed half of what we weigh, how did he get through that? And so, but every training event that we do, I'll always have a guy or a gal that come up and they'll say, man, smelling that ab gas and smelling the parachute silk and getting the knees in the breeze, hanging out with my brothers, said, that kept me from killing myself. It never fails. Somebody will say it. And so, and if you're for a lot of the guys out there say, well, I'm too old, I'm too fat. And I was way overweight. And back in 2019, and they forced us to go on a diet. And so if you got excess pounds, try the intermittent fast. So that's what the guy that runs it, Bill Markham, he said, some of you boys ain't missed a meal lately. It's all about what you put in your mouth. And he put us on intermittent fast, and which got us in shape, got us rolling around on the ground. And but for the guys that say, well, I can't do that anymore, we jump into water. So you don't have to hit the airfield. You can jump into water. So we threw paralyzed rangers out, I think, just last May. There was 3 or 4 of them. One of them jumped with a dog. And so we'll put their feet and knees together with 100-mile-an-hour tape, sit them in the door like a cargo bundle, and then toss them out. There's a boat that tracks them, and you can hear the yahoo from the ground when these guys are under canopy and they're in charge. They're going where they want to go, and that's it's a beautiful thing. So so again, our recommendations, during Task Force Ranger '93. A lot of people probably know or remember this story, but we lost Corporal Smith to a gunshot wound in the leg, and it hit his femoral artery. And he was one of like 19 kids that died that night, and about 75 wounded. And we just crashed the MASH. And so medical evacuation, they couldn't get to him. And so Smitty died from blood loss. And the sad thing is the task force listened to the pleas of the medics on the radio. They're saying, "You got to get to us, and this kid is going to die." And so after that, I mean, it prompted the Rangers, the regiment, to totally overhaul their entire trauma care. And from that moment on, I mean, they worst case scenario at every mission after that, and taking out leadership, having mass casualties, having more problem getting to the objective than getting off of it or on it. And so that's when the IFAC came in. And so the individual first aid kits became a big thing. And then each ranger was responsible for assessing his own wounds and then treating himself. And that lasted until the closest ranger buddy could get to you with his IFAC and then take over. And then so rangers in the platoon were received, first aid training as combat lifesavers. So once combat lifesaver got to you, got a next level of care, and then because they carried actually additional first aid equipment, and then the medic. Once the medics got and arrived on scene, and they took over. But it's this triage of care from the time the guy looks down and actually I talked to a kid too that had a traumatic amputation, and he said he rolled over on his back, knew he was hurt, looked up and his leg was gone, and he took his own belt off and tied a tourniquet on his leg, on his stump, his nub, and amazing. So that they started much like they did in Vietnam, identifying blood types on the uniform. And so anybody with O negative or a universal donor was identified in the platoon. And so they were marked, and if the bleeding could not get stopped, and the medics initiated arm-to-arm blood transfusion on the battlefield, which is just unreal. So this continued until medical evacuation was accomplished. And I was talking to the RSO, it's been a year plus ago. And he said that there was one kid in Afghanistan that they did 9 quarts. And so they kept him all the way in the chopper, and just so that he wouldn't bleed out by this intravenous transfusion. And so what Tony and I looked at, we said, if we're serious about preventing suicide, And we need to implement the best practices from the Ranger community, what they did with the trauma, and with the same amount of urgency. So if you're in uniform, each individual service member should be trained to recognize the need for self-care. I mean, you know yourself, but you're just ashamed to say it, embarrassed to say it, don't want to say it because you might get in trouble or you might not get on the next mission. But you have to be able to recognize it and raise it. Every ranger should be trained to identify warning signs through contact and conversation. That's asking the right questions. The five F's rather. And then selected individuals like team leaders, squad leaders, guys that care anyway. They should be trained in advanced counseling techniques. I mean, we're pretty adapted. If the bed's not made, the boots aren't shined, the hair's not cut, the uniform's out of whack, your gun's not clean. We're adapted to that kind of counseling. But we also need, I think, to take it just the next step. You have to turn into Sigmund Freud, but you should know some counseling techniques for a kid that's struggling. And then, of course, professional counselors should be available at the unit level, and I think they are now. I think through the local performance centers, they do have counselors
They do.
available, and there should be no stigma attached to any of this. At that point, it should go to care for the ranger, care for the soldier, and then, of course, there's us, the veteran community, and we should adopt the same type of tactics as we're going through this transition. Transition is tough. And so just keep track of your ranger buddies, maintain your relationships, call them, ask the five questions, intervene as appropriate through lunch, and then join a veterans organization. Like I said, the Hard Rock Charlie guys from Eagle Claw, I mean, they're still together, from like 1978. And they run an annual muster down here in Florida with an airborne operation through the Brown Canopy guys. So I think a couple of years ago, the oldest ranger to jump was actually Dave Grange at 75 years old. So, and again, it's a water jump, your buoyancy compensators, and the boat tracks you from exit to pickup. And it's surprising, again, that the smell of avgas just being back in the community, hearing the pop of the parachute silk as the guys exit, it's amazing. Then, of course, you got your knees in the breeze, and it just does wonders for your soul. So join those veterans organizations, the Three Rangers Foundation. I mean, it's just because it's different out among the English. That camaraderie, I think, saves lives.
Yeah, a couple things you hit on is, the question to ask. You hear all the time and you see advertisements. Every nonprofit's got at the bottom, the call the 988 number. And, what we try to do with the Ranger for Life program is realize you got to get left to boom. If somebody's dialing the 988 number, it's too late.
You're right.
Should
Yep.
have figured it out. And it goes back to, well, I wish he had called me. Maybe you should have called him, but more important, and when I first heard you speak about this, about the five Fs, and and the questions you asked some people, I thought, yeah, someone told me that a long time ago. I'm not sure who it was, and I'm sure it was an old Sergeant Major, but when I talk to guys, it's just not how you doing, because you're right, you're gonna be lied to. And to ask those right questions based on those big five, and if you don't ask the questions, they're not going to tell you, because you've got that pride factor in there. And a big factor on transition, obviously, we talk to a lot of transitioning rangers and try to make their transition smooth. And every ranger, they almost start off with the same thing. I want to find purpose, I want to help, and I want to find that kind of job, and we go, that's a very small part of your purpose is your job. I mean, your job is something you want to go to work and feel good about going to work and coming home, and not something you hate, but that is a very small part of your purpose. And it goes back to your five Fs. It's a very, very small part of it. Yeah, it's been, it's the second time we've talked this subject, and I'm more and more impressed, and certainly a better person listening to you again. The last question we like to ask everybody we talk to is how would you describe how you found success, fulfillment, after service? And that's something that people, yeah, that's probably the biggest anxiety of everybody that gets out, is how am I gonna be successful? What's my purpose? I think the word purpose is probably overused, but What makes you feel good about getting up and basically having, more good days than bad days? You touched on a lot of them, but what do you think the secret is?
You know, and some guys, you should not fear retirement. Yeah, and I tell everybody, you got about a 10-year shelf life. If you want to do ROTC or junior ROTC, or if you want to work for the government, those kinds of things, you got about a 10-year shelf life where your tactics, techniques, procedures, and all that kind of stuff is going to make you a productive member of that team. But then again, you're taking on a lot of the same angst that you just gave up in retirement. So, but then again, some guys want to make a clean break. So it's all about keeping security clearances active, being getting educated, and so that you have those skills to carry you through. But don't fear retirement, because a lot of guys treat it like the phases of death. You're in denial, and well, they can't live without me. And then once you get into acceptance, it gets a little easier. But don't fear the retirement. And then you've got to find peace. That's the bottom line. I mean, peace is not the absence of war or conflict. It's the absence of rage. I mean, a lot of guys will have this internal rage in them, and it's spiritual. So the truth is, and this is what I found out, it was we're spiritual beings made in the image of God. And we're not, we lose sight of that. We think God has a face. I need the hand of God. I want the face of God. But if we're made in His image, we're spiritual beings, and we're occupying this meat sack. So we're trapped in this body that begins to die the day you're born. And so you got to get beyond that. This is the thing. So make good use of your time. Make amends with people. Life's too short to be angry all the time. Do something you love with somebody you love, for somebody you love, if that makes sense. Stay
Yeah.
in shape. Keep challenging yourself mentally and physically. Don't get complacent. Now, we talk about complacency kills, but not only in combat, but it does in regular life too. And then just remember that we are all closer to the finish line than we are to the starting point. So it's critical to understand that it doesn't end here. So there is something else beyond it, and do some research on what's next. That would be my number one advice. We pride ourselves in figuring out branches, sequels, issuing a frag order, honing our actions on enemy contact until they become like second nature. And so we can react faster than the enemy. And again, life after the military is no different. You just got a different mission statement, different commander's intent. So I like to tell the Rangers too is every one of them kids, every one of the Rangers, they stood on a mountaintop somewhere. I mean, some of them stood on the top of the Hindu Kush. They've seen the ocean. They've scuba dived under the ocean. They've humped through forests, through deserts, through jungles, snow-covered tundra on skis, pulling Akios. I mean, they've jumped out of airplanes and helicopters, and it's weird. I mean, when you're under canopy and you're looking down, I mean, everything looks so ordered, doesn't it? And so they've seen the curvature of the earth from a parachute canopy. And the sunrises and the sunsets that these kids have seen, that few humans ever get to see that stuff. And so if you just think in those terms, there's no way on planet Earth that you can see all of that and doubt the existence of a creator God. If you can just get to that point to say, I'm a speck, there's something bigger out there than me. And so what that a lot of it was through this, through researching this stuff here that I got back into church, and I finished the seminary. I just finished the seminary this year, and going into it overwhelmed me. And it was the first time I had done school in a long time. But it was the neat thing is it was some of the coolest history I've ever seen. And but in order to understand it all, and I don't know if I told you this before, but I used the military decision making process. I actually pulled out old RSOP manuals, and I used the mission planning tools from the RSOP. And so I plugged in all the information that I'm getting. I'm taking like 2 or 3 classes a day. There were 6 days a week, and in order to understand it all, I just put everything into a synchronization matrix. I channeled my inner Major Farrader, and, and so I did. I came up with a mission statement, commander's intent, created lines of effort that turned into phase lines. There were critical decision points. There were left and right limits. And then I had a timeline that started with Genesis, and then it goes all the way to Revelation. And so I laid out all 73 books of the Bible in chronological order. And I won't lie to you, that it fascinated me. It made sense. I mean, it became so real that you could touch it. And then you look at it and you're like, the only way that God could have done it is like that. And so I never expected the RSOC to prove to me that God was real, and he had a plan. And so I guess that's the next phase of my life. I think is I'll get ordained in October for the diaconate, and then you usually do a couple of years, working with widows and orphans, and having a ministry. But and then that I'll transition to be a priest, probably in a year or two. And but I want to be a chaplain to Rangers and the soft guys that are struggling with this, because they're I wouldn't lie to you, Mike. There is something there, swear. So if you're looking for peace, there it is. I'd recommend it highly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm definitely with you on that. I got a similar story. Haven't gotten off my butt to go and become a deacon, but I sure think about it. But man, that's a lot of work.
It is, but yeah, and I laugh about it sometimes too, because it's so similar to what we left.
Yeah, it
And
is.
we had the Ranger Creed, they've got the Nicene Creed. We had task, condition, standard, they got the Bible. It was we had high standards that we had to meet. So does God. So if you don't know what He loves, you don't know what He hates. If you don't know how He speaks to you, there's 5 ways that He speaks to you. If you don't know that love, hate, and how He speaks, you're whistling past the graveyard, and your radio's not even turned on. And so, and then learning that stuff was, like I said, it was fascinating, and it's easy once you got it. It's just like staying in regiment. It's easy to stay in regiment. It's easy to not get relief for cause. You just do what you're told, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Ranger Blue Book was written. Somebody got into canon law and said, "Okay, let me change some jargon here a little bit."
I got to agree 100%.
All right, Rick. It's always good to catch up with you. Thanks again for everything that you have done and you continue to do for the community. Really wise counsel there. You're always that guy that looks deeper into things and make other people think. And I think that's what leaders do more than anything else. You don't make decisions, you make people think so they can figure it out on their own. And because that's what sticks. And you've always been that kind of leader since I first met you. I guess it was 77 or 78. But yeah,
Yeah.
always good to see you.
If
And,
I could close in prayer, Mike, I'd love to do it if you'd allow me.
yeah. But yeah, again, thanks for your time again today and the preparation you put into this. And yeah, I'm sure it's going to affect a lot of people. And yeah, always good to see you. And Rangers lead the way.
All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine down upon you and be gracious unto you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and grant you peace, my brother, this day and for the rest of your life. Amen.
Amen.